The French Revolution, one of the most significant periods in European history, marks a pivotal shift from absolute monarchies to representative governments. But have you ever wondered how this revolution really started? When did the French people decide to overthrow their king and take charge of their destiny? You might be surprised to learn that the French Revolution wasn't a sudden explosion of discontent. Instead, it was the result of decades of simmering tensions and pressures that built to a boiling point. In today's episode, we'll embark on a journey back in time to explore the events and factors that ignited the flames of revolution in France. We'll examine the socio-economic conditions, political mismanagement, and intellectual currents that set the stage for this monumental upheaval. Join us as we uncover the complex web of causes that culminated in the storming of the Bastille and the subsequent downfall of the French monarchy. One of the primary catalysts for the French Revolution was the deeply ingrained social inequality within French society. France was divided into three distinct estates. The first estate comprised the clergy, who enjoyed substantial wealth and privileges. Despite owning approximately 10% of the land, they were exempt from most taxes and held considerable political influence. The second estate consisted of the nobility, who also benefited from tax exemptions and occupied many government positions. While they did not possess as much wealth as the clergy, they still held significant power and lived lives of luxury. The third estate, on the other hand, bore the brunt of the social and economic burdens. Despite making up 98% of the population, they had limited political representation and were subject to various taxes and restrictions. This stark disparity between the privileged few and the underrepresented many created a breeding ground for resentment and discontent. The growing middle class, known as the bourgeoisie, found themselves particularly aggrieved as they lacked the political clout to match their economic and educational advancement. As the revolution gained momentum, the bourgeoisie began to demand a greater voice in government and an end to the feudal privileges that hindered their advancement. The inequitable distribution of power and wealth within French society became a flashpoint for revolution, fueling calls for reform and a more just society. Another major factor contributing to the French Revolution was France's severe financial crisis. By the late 18th century, the French monarchy faced bankruptcy due to decades of extravagant spending and costly foreign engagements. France's involvement in wars such as the 7 Years' War and the American Revolution drained its treasury. Additionally, the country experienced a series of economic downturns and famines, which devastated the peasantry and exacerbated social tensions. The burden of taxation fell heavily on the third estate, while the privileged classes enjoyed exemptions. The growing gap between the rich and the poor widened, leading to increased demands for fairer tax reforms and a redistribution of wealth. As the financial crisis deepened, the French people grew disillusioned with the monarchy's inability to provide stability and prosperity. The inability of the ruling class to address these issues effectively contributed to the growing unrest and ultimately played a role in igniting the revolution. The seeds of the French Revolution were also sown by the intellectual currents of the Enlightenment. During this period, influential thinkers like John Locke, Voltaire, and Jean-Jacques Rousseau challenged traditional notions of authority and governance. Locke's ideas on natural rights, Voltaire's advocacy for religious tolerance, and Rousseau's concept of the social contract profoundly impacted French intellectuals. The Enlightenment emphasized reason, individualism, and the importance of individual rights and liberties. These ideas were instrumental in shaping the revolutionary fervor that would later grip France. The writings of Enlightenment philosophers provided a theoretical framework for challenging the legitimacy of absolute monarchy and demanding constitutional government and the protection of civil liberties. The growing influence of Enlightenment thought among the educated elite and the bourgeoisie created a climate of intellectual ferment that contributed to the revolutionary atmosphere in France. The French Revolution also drew inspiration from the American Revolution, which demonstrated the feasibility of overthrowing an oppressive regime and establishing a republican government. The success of the American colonists in securing independence from British rule sent shockwaves throughout Europe. News of the United States' new constitution and its emphasis on individual rights and popular sovereignty resonated with the French people who yearned for similar freedoms. The American Revolution served as a beacon of hope and a model for those seeking to challenge the absolute monarchy in France. The bravery of the American revolutionaries and their fight for liberty and self-determination inspired French soldiers and intellectuals, laying the groundwork for a transatlantic dimension to the revolution. However, it was the French king's inability to address the mounting grievances and crises that proved to be the catalyst for revolution. Louis XVI's indecisiveness and reluctance to confront the privileged classes alienated him from the very people he was supposed to lead. His extravagance and the lavish lifestyle of the French court at Versailles contrasted sharply with the dire straits faced by the impoverished masses. As the situation in France grew increasingly turbulent, Louis XVI's attempts at reform were often half-hearted or ineffective. The summoning of the Estates General in 1789, intended to address the financial crisis, inadvertently became a catalyst for revolution. The voting system, which gave undue power to the First and Second Estates, highlighted the inherent inequality of the French political system. The deadlock and subsequent collapse of the Estates General revealed the bankruptcy of the absolute monarchy and paved the way for the rise of the National Assembly. As the French Revolution unfolded, it was marked by several key events that escalated the conflict between the revolutionaries and the monarchy. The storming of the Bastille on July 14, 1789 stands as the most iconic event of the revolution. This assault on the fortress, which initially served as a prison and later became a symbol of royal authority, represented the people's defiance against the oppressive regime. The capture of the Bastille and the release of its prisoners symbolized the crumbling of the old order and the transfer of power from the hands of the monarchy to the people. Another significant event was the Women's March on Versailles in October 1789. This demonstration by Parisian women, driven by their need for bread and other essential goods amidst food shortages, resulted in the royal family's relocation to Paris. The march underscored the growing influence of the sans-culottes, the urban working class, and the increasing radicalization of the revolution. The execution of Louis XVI in January 1793 marked a pivotal and controversial moment in the revolution. The former king's trial and condemnation as a traitor by the Revolutionary Tribunal led to his execution by guillotine. This event, along with the Reign of Terror that followed, exemplified the radicalism and violence that characterized the later stages of the revolution. The execution of the king symbolized the complete break between the old regime and the revolutionary government. In conclusion, the French Revolution was not triggered by a single event but rather emerged from a complex interplay of social, economic, and intellectual factors. The French Revolution was a monumental event that reshaped not only France but the course of human history. Understanding its causes is essential to comprehending the trajectory of modern Western civilization. From the social inequalities and financial crises of 18th-century France to the influence of Enlightenment ideals and the call for individual rights and liberties, the seeds of revolution were sown during the reign of Louis XVI. The revolution's trajectory was shaped by iconic events such as the storming of the Bastille, the Women's March on Versailles, and the execution of Louis XVI, which exemplified the growing radicalism and violence that characterized this tumultuous period. The French Revolution serves as a reminder of the importance of addressing social injustices, the dangers of unchecked absolutism, and the enduring quest for liberty and equality. What are your thoughts on the events that led to the French Revolution? How do you think the ideas of the Enlightenment influenced this historical event? Feel free to share your insights and opinions in the comments section below. And if you found this video informative and engaging, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe for more educational content. Thank you for joining me on this journey through history. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the fascinating narratives that have shaped our world.